Communications Officer Lisa Park wiped sweat from her forehead as she leaned closer to her console aboard the UES Defiance. The Deep Space Patrol ship hummed quietly through the void, 3 months into what should have been a routine mission along the Outer Rim. But nothing about today felt routine. The static crackling through her headset suddenly shifted, becoming something else entirely. Voices, alien voices, speaking in panicked tones she'd never heard before. Lisa's heart raced as she quickly routed the signal through the ship's advanced translation system. "Captain Williams to the bridge," she called over the intercom, her voice tight with urgency. Captain Jake Williams arrived within minutes, still pulling on his uniform jacket. At 42, he'd seen plenty of action during humanity's early expansion into space, but his weathered face showed genuine concern as he approached Lisa's station. "What do we have, Park?" he asked, settling into his command chair. Lisa's fingers danced over her controls, fine-tuning the translation algorithms. "Unknown alien transmission, sir. The AI is working through the language patterns now." She paused as clearer words began filtering through. "Sir, they're asking for help." The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of electronics. Jake leaned forward as the translation became clearer. "This is merchant vessel, gentle current. We are peaceful traders, ... under attack by raider ships, ... We have younglings aboard. Please, anyone who can hear this." Navigator Amy Stone looked up from her station, her young face pale. She'd only been assigned to the Defiance 6 months ago, fresh from the Naval Academy. "Sir, I'm tracking the source. Those coordinates put them deep in uncharted space, at least 3 days out at maximum burn." Jake studied the star charts floating above Amy's console. The region was marked in red, known pirate territory, where few civilized ships dared venture. It was exactly the kind of place where merchant vessels went missing and were never found again. "Could be a trap," Amy continued quietly. "Pirates have used fake distress calls before to lure rescue ships into ambushes." Chief Engineer Tom Bradley spoke up from the back of the bridge. "Captain, if it is real, those merchants don't have 3 days. From what I'm hearing, their ship is already taking damage." Jake stood and walked to the main view screen, staring out at the starfield ahead. 37 souls under his command. Good people who'd volunteered for the dangers of deep space patrol, knowing full well they might never make it home. Each one had families waiting, dreams unfulfilled, lives worth living. But somewhere out there, alien civilians, possibly children, were dying while he debated. "Sir," Lisa called softly, "the transmission is getting weaker. I think they're losing power." Jake turned back to his crew. These weren't career soldiers or hardened Marines. Lisa had been a civilian communications tech before joining the space service. Amy was barely 25, still sending letters to her parents back on Earth. Tom had left behind a small engineering firm to join their mission. Yet when Jake asked the question that would define them all, there wasn't a moment's hesitation, all in favor of responding to the distress call. Every hand on the bridge shot up immediately. No debate, no discussion of odds or tactical disadvantages. Lisa didn't even look away from her console as her hand went up. Amy's hand was already reaching for her navigation controls before Jake finished speaking. "Amy, set course for those coordinates," Jake ordered, settling back into his captain's chair. "Maximum burn. Tom, I want every ounce of power you can give me to the engines." "Aye, sir." Both officers responded simultaneously as the Defiance changed course and began accelerating toward unknown danger. Jake felt a familiar mixture of pride and worry. This was what separated humans from so many other species they'd encountered. When someone called for help, humans answered. It didn't matter if they were alien, unknown, or potentially hostile. It was simply the right thing to do. Captain Ziltar pressed all 4 of his thin arms against the bridge viewport, watching helplessly as the raider ships moved in closer. The peaceful current had been drifting without power for 2 hours now, ever since the pirates had disabled their engines with some kind of energy weapon he'd never seen before. His crew of 23 Villani merchants huddled at their stations, their large eyes filled with terror. They were peaceful traders, not warriors. Their species had evolved on a gentle world, with light gravity and sweet air. Violence was almost unknown in their culture, which made them perfect targets for the ruthless pirate gangs that prowled these empty regions of space. "Captain," whispered his communications officer, her voice barely audible. "I've been broadcasting our distress signal on all frequencies for the past hour, but sir, no one comes to this part of space anymore, not since the pirates claimed it as their territory." Ziltar nodded sadly. The civilized species of the galaxy had long ago learned to avoid these dangerous sectors. The Galactic Council's patrol ships stuck to well-traveled trade routes, and merchant vessels like his own were warned never to venture into the outer rim alone. But the peaceful current had been carrying rare crystals that could only be found in this region, and the profit margins had seemed worth the risk. Now, as he watched the pirate vessels closing in, Ziltar realized how foolish that decision had been. "Sir," his sensor operator called out suddenly, her voice shaking. "I'm detecting new ships approaching." 3 vessels, moving at incredible speed. Ziltar's heart sank even lower. More pirates, probably. They often worked in coordinated groups, surrounding their prey before moving in for the kill. "Can you identify them?" he asked weakly. The sensor operator studied her instruments carefully, her expression growing more confused by the second. "Captain, the configuration? It matches descriptions from the galactic databases. I think they might be human ships." A collective gasp went up from the bridge crew. Several of the younger Villani actually fainted, slumping over their consoles in terror. Humans, the legendary Deathworlders. Every civilized species in the galaxy had heard the stories about humanity, though most believed them to be exaggerated myths. According to the reports, humans came from a world so hostile that it should have been impossible for intelligent life to evolve there. Their planet had crushing gravity that would flatten most species, an atmosphere so corrosive it could eat through metal, and vast oceans of liquid that dissolved organic matter on contact. The humans themselves were said to be equally impossible. They could survive in the vacuum of space longer than most species could hold their breath. They consumed deadly toxins as recreational beverages. Their bodies produced their own chemical weapons when threatened, and they could function normally, in temperatures that would kill other beings instantly. Worst of all, they seemed to actively seek out danger, while every other intelligent species had learned to avoid hostile environments. Humans deliberately traveled to the most dangerous places in the galaxy. They built settlements on worlds that no sane being would even visit. They explored black holes, flew through asteroid fields, and treated deadly radiation like a minor inconvenience. "Captain," the sensor operator whispered, "the human ships are changing course. They're heading straight for us." Ziltar felt his forearms begin to tremble uncontrollably. In all his years as a merchant captain, he had never encountered humans before. Few Villani had. Their species existed on opposite ends of the galactic arm, and humans rarely traveled to civilized space. But here, in this lawless region, where only pirates and madmen ventured, it made perfect sense that humans would appear. This was exactly the sort of place these Deathworld creatures would feel at home. "What should we do, Captain?" asked his communications officer. Ziltar stared at the approaching ships on his screen. The pirate vessels had also detected the humans, and were already beginning to change their formation. Even the raiders seemed nervous about facing Deathworlders. "We wait," Ziltar said quietly, though his voice shook with fear. "And we pray to the ancestors that if we must die today, it will be quick." As the human ships drew closer, Ziltar couldn't help but wonder if being captured by pirates might actually be preferable to whatever the legendary Deathworlders had in store for them. Warchief Exelon stood tall on the bridge of his flagship. the Crimson Talon, watching the 3 human ships approach with what he considered foolish bravado. His scaled lips pulled back in a cruel smile, revealing rows of sharp teeth that had intimidated countless victims over the years. The Kreks had been the terror of this sector for decades. Their raider fleets were perfectly designed for hunting merchant vessels, fast, heavily armed, and equipped with the latest shield technology stolen from military shipyards across the galaxy. Vexilon himself had led over 200 successful raids, and his reputation struck fear into the hearts of traders throughout known space. "Human ships, you have entered Kreks territory," he broadcast on all frequencies, his voice dripping with menace. "Turn back now, or share the fate of these foolish merchants." The response from the lead human ship was immediate and utterly unexpected. "This is Commander Tom Mitchell of the UES Retribution. You have exactly 30 seconds to release those civilians and surrender, or we will take them by force." Vexilon's bridge crew erupted in harsh laughter. The arrogance of these Deathworlders was beyond belief. 3 small ships against his fleet of 8 heavily armed raiders. It would be a massacre. "Open fire," Vexilon ordered with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. "Show these humans why civilized species fear the void." The Kreks warships unleashed a devastating barrage of plasma fire that lit up the darkness of space like a miniature star. Energy beams that could slice through the hulls of most ships, like hot knives through butter, streaked toward the human vessels. But something impossible happened. The human ships didn't even slow down. The plasma fire struck their hulls, and simply absorbed. The metal glowed white-hot for a moment, then cooled back to its normal color. The human ships kept coming, accelerating directly toward the Kreks, fleet with what could only be described as suicidal intent. "What kind of armor plating is that?" gasped Vexilon's weapons officer, staring at his readouts in disbelief. On the bridge of the Retribution, Commander Tom Mitchell checked his tactical display with grim satisfaction. The ship's experimental ablative armor was performing exactly as designed, dispersing the plasma energy across thousands of hexagonal plates that could be jettisoned when they reached critical temperature. "All ships, move to boarding formation," Tom ordered calmly. "Prepare assault teams." These pirates picked the wrong civilians to threaten. The human ships split into attack patterns that defied every known principle of space combat. Instead of maintaining safe distances and trading long-range fire, like civilized species, they accelerated straight into the heart of the Kreks formation with reckless abandon. Vexilon watched in growing horror as the lead human ship rammed directly through his outer defense line, its reinforced hull cutting through the lighter raider vessels like they were made of paper. Explosions bloomed across his fleet as human ships ignored their own safety to get close enough for boarding actions. "This is madness," he roared. "No species fights like this." But the humans were just getting started. As their ships locked onto the larger Kreks vessels with magnetic grapples, airlocks began cycling open. What emerged defied everything Vexilon thought he knew about space warfare. Human marines poured out in simple pressure suits that looked almost primitive compared to the advanced environmental systems other species required. They carried basic kinetic weapons instead of sophisticated energy rifles. Their equipment seemed designed for function over elegance, built to work in any conditions rather than looking impressive. But they moved through the vacuum of space like they were born to it, where other species would have been dead within seconds of exposure. The humans treated the hostile environment as merely another battlefield. Lieutenant Brad Cooper led the first assault team through a breach in the Kreks flagship's hull, his boots clanging against metal as artificial gravity took hold. The Kreks crew inside stared at him with absolute terror, unable to believe that anyone could survive in the conditions he'd just endured. "Surrender now and you live," Brad announced through his suit's external speakers. "Keep fighting and find out why they call us Death." The Kreks warriors, who had terrorized merchants for years with their superior technology and numbers, found themselves facing an enemy that simply refused to die. Human Marines advanced through corridors filled with toxic atmosphere, shrugged off energy weapon hits that should have been lethal, and fought with a determination that bordered on insanity. Within minutes, the tide of battle had turned completely. The last Krex Raider ship limped away into the darkness, its engines trailing sparks and debris. Commander Tom Mitchell watched it disappear on his tactical display before turning his attention to what really mattered, the damaged Vellani merchant vessel drifting helplessly nearby. All ships, switch to rescue operations, Tom announced over the fleet communication channel. Let's see what we can do for these civilians. Medic Rachel Torres was already suiting up in the Retribution's airlock bay, checking her portable medical kit one final time. Through the small viewport, she could see the Vellani ship Peaceful Current, its hull punctured in at least a dozen places where pirate weapons had torn through the metal. Atmosphere was venting from several breaches, creating glittering clouds of frozen gas in the vacuum. Torres, what's your assessment? Tom's voice crackled through her comm system. Rachel studied the damage through her helmet's enhanced optics. Multiple hull breaches, sir. Looks like their life support is failing. I'm reading toxic atmosphere leaking throughout the ship. Something the pirates must have pumped in to disable the crew. She sealed her helmet and cycled through the airlock, pushing off gently toward the alien vessel. Her suit's thrusters fired automatically, adjusting her trajectory as she approached one of the larger breaches in the Peaceful Current's hull. Inside, the scene was worse than she'd expected. The ship's corridors were filled with a yellowish gas that would have been lethal to most species, and several Vellani crew members lay unconscious on the deck. Their large eyes were closed, and their normally pale blue skin had taken on a sickly green tinge. I'm inside, Rachel reported, pulling out her portable atmospheric scanner. The air is definitely toxic, but my suit's handling it fine. I've got multiple casualties here. She knelt beside the first Vellani she encountered, a young crew member, who couldn't have been much older than a human teenager. The alien's breathing was shallow and rapid, clearly struggling against whatever poison the pirates had introduced to their ship. Easy there, big guy, Rachel said softly, her voice automatically translated through her suit's communication system. You're safe now. I'm going to help you. The young Vellani's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Rachel's helmet with obvious terror. Rachel realized this might be the first time any of these aliens had seen a human up close. From their perspective, she probably looked like some kind of armored monster moving through their poisoned atmosphere without any visible difficulty. It's okay, she continued in the same gentle tone she used with human patients. I know I look scary, but I'm here to help. My name is Rachel, and I'm a medic. Meanwhile, Engineer Mike Davis had attached his thruster pack and was working his way around the outside of the Vellani ship, carrying a portable welding unit and a bundle of hole patch materials. Each breach in the alien vessel's hull required careful attention, not just to stop the atmosphere leak, but to ensure the repairs would hold under the stress of moving the damaged ship to safety. Davis here, he reported through his comm. Starting repairs on breach number 4. This is going to take a while. Their hull material is completely different from anything we use. Mike positioned himself outside one of the larger holes, sparks cascading around his helmet as his welding torch began sealing the damaged metal. In the vacuum of space, the sparks created a beautiful but dangerous light show, each one a tiny piece of molten metal that could puncture his suit if he wasn't careful. Back inside the ship, Rachel had managed to move 3 unconscious Vellani to a cleaner section of corridor where the toxic atmosphere was less concentrated. Her suit's medical scanners were having trouble reading alien biology, but she could at least provide basic life support and oxygen. Supplementation. Captain's appeared around a corner, moving slowly and obviously struggling to breathe. When he saw Rachel kneeling beside his injured crew members, his 4 arms began trembling again, but this time, It wasn't entirely from fear. Double quotes you, ... You came, he wheezed through his translator device. The distress call. We never thought. Rachel looked up from her patient, her helmet's faceplate reflecting the emergency lighting. Of course we came. That's what we do. She pulled out several emergency ration packs from her kit and offered them to Ziltar. The food wasn't biologically compatible with Vellani digestive systems, but the packages contained water and basic nutrients that might help counteract the effects of the poison. I don't understand, Ziltar said, accepting the supplies with shaking hands. We are strangers to you, different species. Why would you risk your lives for us? Rachel paused in her work, considering the question. It seemed so obvious to her that she'd never really thought about it before. Because you needed help, she said simply, and because it was the right thing to do. 3 weeks after the rescue, Captain Ziltar stood before the most powerful governing body in known space, the Galactic Trade Council. The massive chamber on the neutral world of Centralis housed representatives from over 300 different species, each sitting in environmental pods designed for their specific atmospheric needs. Ziltar had never imagined he would address such an assembly. As a simple merchant captain, he usually dealt with local trade officials and port authorities, but the story he carried was too important to keep to himself. Honored council members, he began, his forearms trembling slightly as he spoke into the translation matrix. I come before you to report an incident that challenges everything we thought we knew about the species called humans. A ripple of interest went through the chamber. Councilmember Telmari, a tall, graceful being from the Zephyrian homeworld, leaned forward in her crystalline pod. The Zephyrians were among the oldest spacefaring races, and their wisdom was respected throughout the galaxy. Captain Telmari said, her melodic voice carrying across the chamber. The preliminary reports we received were difficult to believe. Please tell us exactly what happened. Ziltar took a deep breath and began his story. He described the pirate attack, the hopeless situation his crew had faced, and the distress call that no one should have answered. As he spoke, holographic displays showed the damaged peaceful current, the surrounding pirate ships, and the impossible rescue that followed. The humans appeared in the most dangerous sector of space, Ziltar explained, his voice growing stronger. As he continued, they came not for profit or territory, but simply because we asked for help. They risked their own lives to save complete strangers, beings they had never met, from a species they barely knew existed. The chamber fell silent as Ziltar described the battle. He told them how human ships absorbed weapons fire that should have destroyed them, how human marines fought in conditions that would kill most species instantly, and how human medics worked tirelessly to save injured Vellani, despite the biological incompatibility. But the most remarkable thing, Ziltar concluded, was not their fighting ability or their technology. It was their compassion. When the battle ended, they immediately turned to helping the wounded. They shared their own food and medical supplies. They repaired our ship and escorted us to safety, asking for nothing in return. Council member Telmari studied the data scrolling across her personal display. The reports included sensor readings, communication logs, and detailed accounts from multiple witnesses. Everything supported Ziltar's incredible story. These Deathworlders, she mused aloud, perhaps we have misjudged them entirely. The term Deathworlder had always carried negative connotations in galactic society. It suggested beings who were violent, unpredictable, and dangerous to civilized species. But Ziltar's report painted a very different picture of humanity. Honored Council, spoke up another representative, a Corvan diplomat whose species had encountered humans during border negotiations. We have received similar reports from our outer colonies. Human ships have been responding to distressed calls throughout our territory, always offering assistance without asking for anything in return. More voices joined the discussion. A Dacian trade minister mentioned human rescue operations near black holes. A Valdorian military attach described humans sharing their medical technology during a plague outbreak. Each story followed the same pattern, humans appearing in dangerous situations to help others, regardless of the personal cost. Within days of the council session, the story began spreading across galactic communication networks. The image of humans as mindless killers from a death world was slowly being replaced by something far more complex and, in many ways, more frightening to established powers. These humans didn't just survive in impossible conditions, they actively sought out danger to help others. They treated the deadly vacuum of space like their own backyard. They considered the most hostile regions of the galaxy perfectly suitable for patrol routes, and most unsettling of all, they seemed to believe that helping strangers was worth dying for. On Earth, Admiral John Roberts sat in his office, overlooking the sprawling complex of Human Space Command. Reports were streaming in from across human territory, not of victories in battle or successful colonization efforts, but of rescue operations and humanitarian missions. His desk display showed dozens of distress calls that had been redirected to human space over the past week. Other species had begun specifically requesting human assistance, knowing that where others would not, or could not go, humans would answer. Robert smiled as he read through the latest reports. The EU's Defiance had responded to a mining accident in the Kepler Nebula. The UES Guardian had rescued survivors from a transport crash on a toxic world. The UES Vigilant had driven off pirates, threatening a peaceful research station. This was how humanity would make its mark on the galaxy, Roberts realized, not as conquerors or colonizers, but as the species that others could count on when everything went wrong, when ships were lost in the dark between stars, when colonies faced disaster, when pirates threatened, the innocent humanity would be there. The phone on his desk chimed, and his aide's voice came through the speaker. "Admiral, we're receiving another distress call. A science vessel is trapped near a neutron star, and the Galactic Patrol says it's too dangerous to attempt a rescue." Roberts was already reaching for his jacket. "Prep the nearest response fleet," he said, "and tell them we're on our way." In the vast darkness of space, someone needed help, and as long as humans drew breath, that call would never go unanswered.